Mr. Mittal, how do you see India-US relations going forward under the Trump administration, Trump 2.0?
I think the Trump 2.0 administration will be very positive for India. It will strengthen the partnership that's already there. It will deepen defense ties, manufacturing ties, economic ties, and I think, as I've said before, I fully expect Prime Minister Modi to come to America or President Trump to visit India, or at the very least meet on the sidelines of a multilateral summit next year.
So under the Biden administration, we have seen a number of very critical initiatives which were taken by the both sides. One is Iset. So how do you see the future of Iset under the Trump administration?
I think it'll only get stronger. I think as the Trump administration seeks to counterbalance China, reduce China's influence in the Indo-Pacific, I think they're very likely to grow those ties. They're very likely to help India in its own defense needs. America is already a huge defense partner with India. I think the last 15 years have involved about $20 billion of trade. It's a major defense partner for India. So I think ISET and the critical technologies are going to become just as important. Indian firms are stepping up in terms of manufacturing, in terms of high-skilled technology. And so as America tries to reduce China's influence, that includes things like critical technologies. It's going to look to India as a supply chain strengthener, as a partner for a lot of these issues.
So IMEC is another initiative, in fact, which was initiated by a number of countries, but India and US played a very key role in rolling it out on the sidelines of the Z20 summit in New Delhi last year. Do you think the IMEC project will also, be implemented with full energy by the Trump administration?
Well, I can't speak to like specific projects all in full detail because I don't know exactly what their policies are going to be rolled out. They probably don't know. They're still formulating those policies. But I will say, in terms of overall engagement with India, it's going to get better, and it's going to, some people are saying, well, Trump's America First policy is going to actually hurt India in the long run with tariffs and things like that. I just don't know if that's going to be the issue. I think Trump is going to use tariffs to strike a deal more than actually use them to hurt India. Same thing with other issues like defense. Trump wants to bring defense manufacturing and high-skilled industries back into America, but that only benefits India because India is a huge industry for human capital, for technology, tertiary and secondary partnerships with Indian manufacturing and supply companies. So whatever the Trump administration does to strengthen America, it's actually going to benefit India because it's in both countries' interest for shared prosperity and innovation. You can only go to places like India for things like that, for the human capital and like I said, for manufacturing and shore up your bases. So
can you analyze, in fact, how the Trump 2.0 will be different from the Biden administration in terms of relations with India?
I think the Biden administration looked at India as a much more multilateral way. They talk more about shared values. They talk more about democracy and sort of tried to pull India into multilateral issues and things that India maybe was not interested in. For example, Ukraine. For example, pulling India into complying with Russia's sanctions. I just don't think that was the best approach for India because India has its own interest. India is not a complete ally with America, so that was never going to work out in the long run. And I think Trump's interests are going to the Trump administration and the Indian administration's interests are going to align much better when they're not about these kind of ideas of democracy spreading in the world and democracy building and those kind of things, consensus building. The consensus is going to be an India-US consensus. It may not involve third countries. I mean, the Biden administration approach was what used to happen in the past when India and U.S. would have talks. They would always bring up Pakistan. They would always bring up Kashmir. That ended with Mr. Trump. That ended with the first Trump administration. So that's going to continue with Trump 2.0, and you're not going to see a lot of these kind of multilateral issues being brought up. Comments on India's internal democracy, internal issues, and even things like the Indo-Canadian spat. These are minor issues. Immigration. These are not top of the pile issues. These are bottom of the pile issues. So anybody who's commenting on saying that immigration or Indo-Canadian issues are going to just override the relationship, that's just not true. I just don't see it that way. Republicans you talk to, they're very pro-India. They're not interested in these kind of smaller issues. So many of them are not even aware of it. It's not something they think about when it comes to India.
Do you think the relations will be more of a kind of transactional under Trump administration, and the focus will be more on trade, tariff, and trade-related issues actually.
Yes, like I said, on trade issues, Trump may try to threaten tariffs. He's done that before, but there were very minor sort of setbacks in the relationship. Wasn't even a setback. It was just a minor kind of problem with the relationship, and I just don't think it's going to be the policy of the Trump administration to start off by angering India. As we all saw, the first call that was made to Mr. Trump was by Mr. Modi. So, and the congratulations as well. So, and he actually picked up the phone, which is again interesting in and of itself. It shows that the relationship is much more stronger than people believe it to be. So, I think going forward, any kind of engagement that Trump administration has with India is not going to be punitive. They may, like I said, try to strike a deal. There may be some bumps in the road, but that does not mean that the relationship is going to be set back or have any kind of major issues. I think it's going to be a mutual respect and friendship kind of relationship.
How do you see Mr. Trump's plan to, impose massive taxes on goods from China? Do you think it will benefit India, or you think that could be also the case for India? Actually, he may impose increasing tariff on goods brought from India. So, how do you see the situation?
Well, Mr. Trump has mentioned that he wants us to impose tariffs on certain things like steel and supplies of certain goods. But like I said, again, a lot of that's just campaign talk. A lot of that's his desire to get a deal. And I think as long as their negotiations continue, those kind of trade talks are normal. This is the art of the deal, as Mr. Trump would say. So I think the more important bumps are going to be things like Elon Musk wants to introduce Tesla into India. He wants to introduce Starlink into India. So how Elon Musk is treated by the Indian regulators is going to be interesting to see. How all the other trade deals that are happening with American companies, especially the Silicon Valley companies, how are they going to be treated in India? That's going to be interesting to see because they have closer relationships with Mr. Trump than some of the other industries in America. And so that may be where I foresee bumps if the Indian regulators start to say, well, we can't allow Tesla into the country. Like I said, that personal relationship may be affected by that. But again, we'll see where that goes. I can't make any strong statements as of now because nobody knows what that policy is going to look like. But in the larger sense, I think it's going to be much better. For example, look at drones, right? Drones are a big deal. Drones were a huge policy for the Trump administration in the first Trump administration, and drones have only gotten more important. And so Indian manufacturers, Indian tech companies and chip companies can be important in making sure that America is up front in drones. China currently is up front in drones. Turkey's doing great with drones, but America doesn't really have a single sort of Apple-like company that does amazing drones. So that may be SpaceX, that may be other companies, and India can play a huge role in that. So I think again that's where the shared vision, the shared innovation, and shared partnership is going to come into play.
So, how do you see the overall defense cooperation forward? In fact, going forward, do you think any change in approach, or do you think continuation of the overall policy?
Well, from the American side, I would say Mr. Trump's approach is to cut the red tape. It's to cut down on the regulation and cut down on a lot of these kind of things that hold back defense deals and trade deals. So from his side, I would say he's much more likely to advocate for American companies entering into Indian markets, and also Indian consumers are an important segment for American companies. So just as with that, we've had Black Hawks. America sold Black Hawks. America sold jet planes, transport planes. And so the next phase of that may be jet engines and jet fighters, because India is facing delays in its defense process with its own MRCA project, the 2.0 project. So I think that's a good area of cooperation. That's a good area of innovation where India might seek help from America and might seek a better deal from America in terms of getting jet engines and in terms of getting a better supply and tech transfer for its own defense industry.
So energy has been a very important area of cooperation in the last 4 years. The focus has always been on clean energy. Do you think, in fact, the focus on clean energy will continue, or it will be more of a kind of priority in the fossil fuel sector?
I think that emphasis on clean energy is going to definitely be much more dulled. I think the Biden administration put a ban on LNG exports. I think that's one of the first things that's most likely to go, the ban on LNG exports. I think, a good way to look at it is the geopolitical situation. America obviously wants to make a deal with Russia on Ukraine. Russia is benefiting from the energy market right now. And so America needs to ramp up its energy production, its own, oil and gas production here at home. A lot of that was stopped by Mr. Biden when he became president in the first few days. So that's one of the first policies that Trump is going to implement is a positive energy growth for America and make sure that America is energy dominant. And then when that's the case, it's going to be able to negotiate with Russia better. And then it can also sell that energy to India on a much cheaper basis, on a much more friendlier basis. So that's, again, an area of cooperation and an area of, transactional basis that's going to do good things for both India and America.
Do you think, in fact, the cooperation under the Quad framework in the Indo-Pacific will continue? Because Mr. Biden projected the Quad success story as one of his, highlight of his, administration. So, do you think India-US cooperation in the Indo-Pacific, also under the framework of Quad, will continue?
Yeah, I think Mr. Biden's talk about the Quad was maybe a little too optimistic, in my opinion. If you look at the statements that the Quad put out, they were very cautious about China. They were very cautious to not name China and not to antagonize China. That maybe also because Australia is trying to improve its relationships with China, and also the Democrats didn't really want to antagonize China. So I think if the Quad is strengthened, and I think that's a good way of gauging where Trump 2.0 and India are going, is if Trump actually has a Quad meeting and mentions China in the statements that the Quad puts out, that's a good way of looking at where that relationship is going, because I think that's what India wants. And I think that's what America, what Mr. Trump wants, is to make sure that China is explicitly named as a bad actor in the Indo-Pacific region, and whatever relationships the Quad does, whatever multilateral agreements are made, they are made to make sure that China's influence is reduced. But if you don't even mention China, then how is that going to happen? How does that benefit any country? So I think, like I said, the Quad is not NATO, but again, similar defense, industry, economic, innovation, technology transfer, those kind of relationships, if they're strengthened, then we know that the Quad is actually operating on a much more functional basis.
Mr. Mittal, we have seen a huge upswing in India-US relations in the last 4 years under the Biden administration. However, in the last few months, we have seen some stress actually on the relationship in view of the Pannoon case. So, do you think it will play out under the Trump administration also?
I think there will be some continuation, because I think it's a matter of concern for America's national security that this happened. But I think it's still a minor roadblock. I don't think it's going to be a much bigger issue. This should have never come out into the open. Look, intelligence agencies and spy agencies and spying is done by all countries. Everybody knows it. It's an open secret. But it's not something that anybody wants to fight out in the public, because then it becomes a matter of nationalism and national concern. Everybody sort of gets their anger up. And so it's not a case that you can really solve in the public eye. I think this is going to be much more, it's going to be relegated to the back channels. It's going to be relegated to, ministerial staff, and it's going to be solved that way. India has already cooperated with the United States, and the United States itself has commended that India has been cooperating with them. So I just don't see it as a much bigger issue. Some people who are opposed to India, or some people who are much more, sort of antagonistic towards India, may try to make it a bigger issue. I just don't see it being a big roadblock.
So another issue actually concerning the Indian American community in the US is Mr. Trump's immigration policy, under which he has resolved to carry out the biggest deportation program of undocumented immigrants from the US. How do you see it?
Well, there may be cause for concern. I certainly won't say that there's no cause for concern. There may be some cause for concern, but look, quite honestly, most Indians who arrived here have arrived here illegally. They have spent many, many years in that process. So, an illegal immigration is a concern for many Indians. The effects of it have affected many Indians as well. And of course, Indians ask all the time, how come these people get to become citizens quickly and we are stuck in a backlog of 100 years? But I will say that I think in terms of cooperation with India, it's going to be much more difficult. Apart from, as I said, sort of some basic issues. If somebody has a green card and they've been deported or they've had issues, I think that's going to be a consular issue. It's not going to be a country-to-country issue. It's a paperwork issue most likely. And but honestly, I mean, if you talk to India, look, no country wants to have a brain drain. No country wants to have its citizens, move away to a different country. So, in terms of diplomatic talks, I just don't think it's going to be a big issue. It's going to be a bottom of the pile issue because nobody in India is going to advocate for more Indians leaving India to come to America. That's just not how diplomatic talks work. So.
Last question, in fact, how do you see the India-US relations moving forward in the next 4 years under the Trump administration?
I think they'll move forward with the, like I said, with a feeling of mutual respect and trust, and they're only going to strengthen and deepen as Mr. Trump implements his foreign policy. I think India is a crucial partner in the Indo-Pacific and in geopolitics as well. It can even function as a back channel for many countries that the United States may not want to talk to and has issues with. And so I think going forward, there's only positivity up ahead and hope up ahead.
Thank you so very much for talking to PTI, Mr. Mittal.
Thank you.